Mark Zamansky, welcome back, my friend. We're live on the streams, man. Good to see you again.
Thank you for having me, Matt. Always a pleasure, brother.
You are the WordPress live stream king these days. You're live streaming 24/7.
I just click the button, man. I just talk. It's sometimes with friends, guests, all that sort of stuff. It's fun. I hate editing, so it's nice.
When you say sometimes with friends, do you ever bring on enemies to your live streams?
I don't know if I have too many enemies. I mean, maybe a couple in the comments section from time to time, but they're normally faceless. But yeah, I mean, I'll talk to anybody. I really enjoy the conversation, and I think we always have things to learn no matter who we're talking to. So
it's a live stream, folks. If you have questions, comments, concerns, leave them as we move along. Today's topic, which we'll try to compact into a single hour, is pick the best clients to grow your agency. And like many of the talks that I give, we might stray away from that core concept just a touch, but we're going to try to highlight as much as we possibly can. Jeff, Brendan's going to be on the show, I think. Brendan, if you're out there, I know you're out there because you just left a comment. Are you waiting on an email from me, or am I waiting on an email from you to book our podcast? You just let me know. Jeff Chandler's out there. I'm just here to say how great my has gotten. Thanks, Jeff. It's because of you, largely. I have all this gray hair. And Brendan, welcome to the show. Let me go ahead and boot up the old slide deck. The old slide deck.
Yeah, we have an actual presentation this time. This is so exciting.
I know, it's just...
Matt went above and beyond for this one. You guys better drop a like on this video. Look at that.
Look at that. Look at that. Look how good
very cute
Google Slides templates are, right? Let me do this. I don't know if I can't go full screen because I'm trying to have both sides here. Let me just see what happens. I'm going to hit play. Slideshow. What does that do? No, I lose my entire screen. So I'm not going to do that because I can't see. This should be good. If you can't see, let me know in the comments. Also recording or streaming from my co-working space today. I don't have the typical setup, so let me know if you hear any technical issues. I don't doubt that there will be some. Here we go, kicking it off. Pick the best clients to grow your agency. If you're I want to know how many people actually relate to the word agency. And I'm actually curious on your thoughts, Mark. Do you call yourself an agency? Do you have a little cute spin on it, like boutique agency? Do you call yourself a consultant, a freelancer? I put that survey out a couple weeks back, and when we were thinking about this idea, a lot of people did resonate with the agency title. But I'm curious if anyone's particularly strays away from it because they don't want that baggage of an agency.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, there's some objectivity and some subjectivity, I would say, to it, right? Because can you really call yourself an agency if you're just one person? I mean, maybe you can, maybe you can't. Like a lot of things are gray here. What I do personally is I've always said agency because that's where I want to go. And that's kind of where, like, if I had a project or, if I've had projects in the past where I need to bring on people and stuff like that, I would consider myself more of an agency than just like a freelancer. I just didn't go into this wanting to be a freelancer, but I know people that call themselves freelancers because they just do it like, they're just freelancing. But yeah, it depends depending on what you want. And I think I saw that, that survey that you put out, and I'm pretty sure I probably said agency. There was a couple other ones though too, right? I know you've said boutique in the past. I've never used that, but I like that term. I don't know. I just kind of see it as like where you're trying to go, and what you ultimately want to do.
So just to give some folks some quick backgrounds, I want to let Mark sort of give a background of where he's been. I'll give you a background on where I've been if you've never seen any of my content before or just really don't know the quick story behind it. So I started an agency 2007, 2008-ish, perfect time of the financial collapse. Started that agency, leaving an ISP where I also managed a web development team. So going back, I had a lot of pretty big background in like tech, web, system admin, all this other stuff, open source servers and software and all that stuff when everything was, kind of blowing up at the time. So I ran that agency for a decade. During that tenure in the agency, also went into the theme and plugin space as well. Jeff, who's in the audience, kind of knows that background from me. He was running a couple plugins and doing a bunch of WordPress themes. got a lot of experience sort of building products. Never hit a home run with the product, but some doubles, maybe some triples year to year with some of the work that we were doing there. I ran that for about 10 years, started having kids, and then went into saying, oh my God, living sort of paycheck to paycheck with agency life is quite difficult. And went into enterprise hosting with a company called Pagely and got a real... I had a handful of enterprise clients at the agency. We're going to talk about that as we progress through this discussion, but got the real experience of what true enterprise needed from WordPress and from hosting and from agencies when I was at Pagely. Disney, New York Times, New York Post, large higher education installs. I saw a lot of what the enterprise was looking for in WordPress. Now I'm purely in the plugin space at gravityforms.com, so I'm seeing it now again back in the trenches from what agencies are using plugins for and what kind of projects they're building, what needs they have. And of course, been podcasting for a decade or so about WordPress. So I have a pretty storied background in the experiences of running an agency and seeing a whole range of projects, large and small, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Mark, I wrote down. I took the liberty to write down web and marketing before you got into the agency space, and now of course you're doing agency plus you're doing content at findittech.com. Anything else? Any other background that you're? What other value do you bring to this live stream? Really?
Yeah, a ton, I guess. No, I mean I've started in kind of like that web marketing thing. I was in college, learned. Kind of like computer science, information science, stuff like that. Had a job for like 3 years in like a technology and marketing kind of role. So got a lot of reps there just in the more corporate environment. Realized that's definitely not where I wanted to be. So I went into more of the agency side of things, started my own stuff. Originally, I would categorize it more as kind of like freelance because I started as I had another job and I wanted to get more into, again, that more agency space, do my own things, stuff like that. So it's continued to grow. Started that around like 2018. I would say really full-time over the past 2 years, though, is where it's like gotten to be more of like a full-time agency type gig. So that has been good. And then, last 6 months to 10 months, I guess, content, just trying to be more involved in the community and everything like that because a lot of really great people doing cool things and just trying to share the things that I've learned with other people that are doing similar stuff because everybody's at a different point in their journey here.
Just a shameless self-promotion. There is a new T-shirt available. Those who have been following me for a while know that I occasionally come out with a new apparel line every few years or so. There's a new one called the Thriving Tee. If you're watching this and you want to support the WP Minute and give a little back to WordPress, you can go to thewpminute.com/shop, pick up your Thriving Tee through the month of June. 20% of proceeds will go to the WordPress Foundation in order to literally and figuratively keep WordPress thriving. thewpminute.com/shop. And again, if you're watching, please share on social media so we can help grow the audience, get folks tuning in right now, and join the newsletter at thewpminute.com/subscribe. Mark and I talked about this topic a few weeks back. I didn't show him the final version of this presentation. He's sort of a viewer at the same time, but he's going to jump in with his questions. He knows what we're going to be talking about, but doesn't know how I've sort of packaged it up. When I think about, and feel free, Mark, at any point to jump in with your 2 cents, but when I think about finding the best clients, it's, for me anyway, it's an introspective on like what I want as an agency owner. Now, this is an agency owner after a decade, sort of having the luxury of 2020, that 2020 vision, of being able to look back and say, oh yeah, like I know I know where I failed, I know what I didn't like, I know what I liked, and now I can kind of like reevaluate this scenario. But I think of it in these three questions, which is largely the driving force behind today's presentation, is what types of clients do you want to serve? What types of projects do you want to work on? And what type of business is right for your current phase in in your agency life, agency world, or your entrepreneurial world, whatever you want to call it. Those are the three sort of large questions that help me shape this presentation, because the best client is the right client for you now. And it's not the best client in the sense of, which ones are the most profitable, although that is a key factor, or which ones do I get along with the best, also, a key factor. But what's the right one for where you're at right now? Because when I started my agency, it was largely about, hey man, I'll do anything. Business cards, brochures, flyers. This is the dawn of Facebook pages. So we would do social media for people. And I'm talking about for pennies, right? For pennies, $50 a month, $100 a month. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just casting this massive net into the ocean and pulling in whoever would say yes. And I don't think there's actually anything wrong with that. I think a lot of folks, we have to do whatever we have to do to get this plane off the ground, to get this business going. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It was a massive learning experience, like never do that again. And really identify, like, oh God, flyers, print, this is not what, I don't know how to do this. I don't want to do this. This is not fulfilling and it's not profitable. And it really had me understand, like, I need to align with what I'm really good at and what I really want to do for my customers, right? At the end of the day, I want to serve customers. I am happy doing this thing, and I want to help people get off the ground. But I need to make sure that I'm doing it for the things that I can do, my core competencies, and line that up with value for the clients. Does that make sense, Mark? Do you look at it that way now? Is it something that you knew right away going into business?
100%. I know people that do that. And again, I don't think it's right or wrong, but I do think it's extremely difficult sometimes to I build websites, but I also do, you need flyers, you need social media. I think we have to remember that each one of those is a discipline in their own right. It's literally, you can make a whole business just off of social media. You can make a whole business just off of graphic design. So when I was kind of getting into it, I didn't really come from the design background either. So I didn't really want to do any print stuff. I didn't really want to do any social media. I like doing my social media, but I never did it for anybody else. So I'd actually say, from my experience, I was pretty decent at trying to stay niched at least into the web stuff, which I'm thankful for. But I'm sure, as we'll talk about more, there's several more layers even in that. So if I'm giving random advice here to anybody that's in this stage or thinking about these types of things, maybe try different things, but only if you don't think you're going to stay in web. If you think that maybe you're oh, I don't know if I want to build websites or do graphic design, it'd be very hard for you to do both. Maybe your agency could ultimately do both. But I don't know. There's just, I would try to do one thing and get really good at it. I feel like that would be kind of a better approach.
Yeah. There's something that, which I don't have in the slide deck. I'm almost compelled to make the slide right now live. But when we talk about what types of clients and some of the issues and faults that I had in my own agency was largely staying in the messy middle of things where you can't quite get to that next level of client, of class of client or whatever, or dollar value, can't quite get to that next level because you're really trying to fix all the issues that have lagged behind, which is, too complex of projects that you price too cheap. You're hiring people. I had full-time employees. It wasn't just, either partnerships or contractors. And there's just an immense cost that comes with that. And it's always that really trying to if I get one more of these great clients, I can really push it to the next level. And you stay in that messy middle for too long because, agency life is tough. If you're not really building out that back end of, support structure, both for your agency itself, but also for the client. How do I do these? I think they call care packages these days, or care plans. It's support, or it's retainer work. I mean, it's the same old thing, but with a different phrase to it. And you can find yourself just stuck in that messy middle. Not enough profit, a lot of cost, can't get to that next client because you're so busy. Whereas if you stayed on extremes, you might have a little bit more wiggle room. And all of that is to say, like, all of this advice today, of course, man, there's going to be some, fringe cases, and we'll talk about that. Like, this might not be the fit for everyone. This is simply how, like, I perceive this stuff, if that makes sense. So I think it's also important to know, like, hey, when we look at the addressable market, which I think I have a slide for, when you think about, like, what your core competency is, hey, you might not even be in design. This is what I like about WordPress, really, is like or the web in general. You might not even be a designer or developer. And you might just want to lean into things like education, consulting, and training. Like, maybe you don't want to have to write a line of code or drag a block around a website. Like, you don't have to. There's ways to, like, make money in this. But what I like about, like, leaning into a core competency is, for example, pre-sales or selling yourself, selling your agency. If a client comes to you, let's say, like, membership, right? Because, Mark, you do a lot of membership stuff. Client comes to you and they go, hey, listen, I heard you're the guy, or you're the agency to go to for membership sites. I really love that you have this portfolio of membership sites that you've built out. Somebody down the street referred me. They said you're the best. You built a portal for them that members log into, all this stuff. But I also want you to take this membership site that we need developed and then tie it into, like, I don't know, Salesforce ERP system, like some whacked out, like, API thing. When you can define your core competency, it gives you this flexibility to go yes and or yes but. And the yes and is, you can say, yes, we're the team that builds membership websites. Here's our portfolio, here's our experience. It's our core competency. It's all we build. And that thing you want with Salesforce, we have capabilities to do it. I'm going to quote it separately. It's going to be a different project. It's not our core competency. We can do it, and I can quote it for you, but it's going to be kind of like this abstracted from, like, our core competency thing. I'll give you a price point on that. Or you have the flexibility to say, yes, but, which is, yes, our core competency is this membership site stuff, but you know what? That Salesforce thing, we don't even touch it, right? We don't even touch it. And I think that's where you have that flexibility, like you were mentioning. You can push yourself, like, push these boundaries to try new things and get bigger projects and quote different services. Just know, like, where you're grounded, where that core competency is, and you're communicating that to the customer. So there's never anything like, well, Mark, you said you could do membership sites and this ERP system. No, I didn't. I said our core competency is memberships, and I can quote this for you, and it might be something new that we've never tried. It's a little bit custom, and we're gonna figure it out. Or you could have went the route of, yes, but we don't even touch that. You're gonna need to find somebody else, or I'll have to find another professional agency that could tie this in, and you can get the costs from them. Does that make sense? Does that feel comfortable to you, or is that how you approach it now in your sales process?
I think there's really two things that are everybody's sales process is similar, obviously, and different. But I think, like, the two things that I've learned the most, and you just articulated them, but just not, I'm gonna say it in not so many words, is you got to manage expectations just from the get-go. Yeah. Like, that is by far and away. Everything else that we talk about here is strategic and tactical, but that is, like, the core thing. If you just tell people from the get-go what you do and don't do, the problem that happens that I see a lot of people get into is, like, the client comes to them and they ask them if they can do something, and then in their mind they're questioning whether they can do it, which in some cases, again, like, it's kind of like outside my scope of what I do, but maybe I could do it. A big one that happens to me all the time, or has happened in the past, is like IT work. It's like, oh, can you set up Google Workspace for me? It's like, well, I've done that for myself. It's not that hard, but do I want to be like, do I want to make a business out of that? Do I want to offer that as a service to somebody? Not really. It's outside of what I, really feel good about and kind of want to do there. So there's that. And then the other thing is just, especially, like, newer people that, like, just haven't had enough reps and really just haven't, like, dealt with enough annoying clients in a lot of ways, was one way to say it, is just realize that you make the rules. Like, you can do whatever the hell you want. You know what I mean? And if you make the rules, then, like, the thing is, you have the power. The beautiful thing about business is like you have the power to make the rules. You can make the wrong decisions and make the wrong rules, but you will go out of business. But like you'll figure that out over time. But the point is that you make the rules, and I just get so much. That's the reason I don't think I could ever be an employee again. It's just because I love that part of it. I don't always make the right decisions, but that's the big thing for me. So
yeah, this is that's a fantastic topic. And I'm glad you reminded me of it. So when I'm looking at this stuff, I'm thinking balance. Like when I'm evaluating services, anybody talks to me and says, hey, I want to get into the services game or something like that. I'm always thinking like there's this balance between efficiency, profitability, and value. Like if I'm building a services business, I need to build this efficient, well-oiled machine to, market to a customer, pre-sales with a customer, onboard them once they say yes, start design development, testing, quality, launch, and then future support. And then how do I rinse, repeat this service or this machine to keep this service going? And oh, by the way, can I do this in a profitable state, right? Can I be profitable as I fine tune these efficiencies and make these arrangements? And at the end of the day, is it valuable? Is what I've built for a customer valuable for them? Did they get what they wanted? And is it valuable for me? Like, do I enjoy the work, that I'm putting out? And the thing about the services game, like Mark is saying, is why I love it is sort of like that no rules thing is Mark can put out a website and sell it for $1,000, and I can do the same website for $10,000. It's about finding, the right presentation, the right delivery, the right experience, the right customers that might see the value in spending $10,000 with me versus $1,000 with Mark, even if it's the same website at the end of the day. That doesn't mean that the experiences were the same. Mark could say, hey, my $1,000 site, you punch a bunch of words into a form, and I go and I build it for you, and I send it off. $10,000 with me might be, hey, Mrs. Customer, we sit down every day for 5 days straight, and we plan this out, and we get to the same result, but maybe the experience was better, so therefore you wanted to pay me 10 grand versus Mark said, just go fill out this form, it's $1,000. These are the types of things that you can build into your agency experience that is really the leg up. Because I know, Mark, you and I have talked about, AI and like cheap websites and all this stuff, which I've said has been an issue forever. But these are the things that you can really get a leg up over your competition, right? There is a lot of competition, but if you focus on experience, not even the code or the design of the website, like the experience of servicing the customer can go leaps and bounds beyond like, oh great, like I use Elementor on this, I use Bricks on that, right? It doesn't even matter. It's about how the customer feels at the end of the day, that you took care of them, that you listened to them, and they got what they wanted. And that's why I really love the agency game for that. Mm-hmm. So this leads right into this slide. Ask yourself what you want from this agency space, or from this client, or from this project. And these are the real extremes here. Left-hand side, I'm just calling small because I couldn't think of another word, and big because I couldn't think of another word. But none of this, small, big, fill in the blank with whatever you want. Project size, it doesn't really matter. But here's how I think of it. I think of like when you're thinking smaller projects, you're thinking, well, easier projects. There's no run of risk of, breaking a law or, having the wrong content up. It's not a detriment to, somebody's business if there's a few misspellings or whatever. Easy projects, basic pages, web design, portfolio sites, whatever. That's a small, easy project. Is that what you want? You just have to ask yourself those questions. Or do you want to go to the opposite side? You want to have an impressive portfolio. Look at these grand sites that I've built. Look how complex they are. Easy projects, maybe it's a couple of small 5-pager sites. It's nice, they look nice, but you're not impressing anyone with that portfolio versus maybe you do some real complex things with WordPress. Mark, you and I have talked about some of the projects I've worked on in the past where we use WordPress as just an intermediary to publish content to web apps. One of my bigger clients when I was in the agency space was a medical company or a medical software startup, where they only use WordPress internally to publish content that goes out to all of these apps that are distributed in hospitals and medical offices around the country. And WordPress was just an amazing publishing tool that could publish that content to those proprietary apps. Impressive, but you're not going to get many of those because not many people are doing that kind of thing with WordPress. Do you want great customers? Right? Hey, man, the customers love me. They hang out. I meet them up at the coffee shop. They refer people to me. They know my family. I know their family. These are great customers. I love these customers. Or do you want big brands and logos on your website? Again, I'm not pitting the two against each other. I think these are two extremes, but also two perfectly viable paths that one might want to go down when they're building their agency, right? Who do I want to serve? What kind of people do I want to deal with day to day? Do you want less stress, right? These sites are just easy sites. The only thing I'm stressed about is getting the customer to send me their photo and an about page, right? I want less stress. Or the opposite is I want more revenue, which means I'm probably going to be taking on more complicated sites. Not all the time, but you're probably going to be taking on bigger projects, working with bigger customers, those big brands and logos that we've seen above. It's probably going to be more revenue, and most certainly should be more revenue, but you're probably going to be met with more stress. You can certainly get stress on the smaller side, but they're an order of magnitude off when you start getting into bigger projects. Do you want a manageable team in your agency life? Do you want it to be just you? Or do you want to be a couple contractors? Or do you want to go to the extreme where you're building a team, you're hiring, you're delegating, you're a manager, you've got multiple managers. Some people like the operations of an agency, and that's cool. Some people thrive off of it because it's a huge part of a successful agency is the operations of it all. Barrel Agency, I think, Peter Kang, I interviewed him years ago, a WordPress agency, but you don't know him in like the typical WordPress circles. He is an operator. He runs multiple holding companies. These agencies do different things, and he loves that business for those reasons. Operations, loves it. Not my thing. Do you want a great lifestyle, right? Is that what you're after here? You just want a lifestyle. Hey, man, I can take a week off. I can take a weekend off. Very easy for me to be in and out, sort of. I've built a great system, and I've got great customers, and they're less stress, and I don't have a big team. So you have that ability to get that lifestyle. Or do you want more opportunities? And I kind of bucketed this into, there's a lot of agencies out there, well, a lot of WordPress agencies out there that now are splitting off and they're building products, they're building SaaS businesses, they're doing things like investing in real estate, right? They've built, and again, Barrel Agency is a great example. It's a bigger agency, you have more revenue, you can start, as an owner, you can start to carve that out and invest into other areas because agency life is, fairly brittle and things can change, in a drop of a hat. So you're able to take some of that revenue and invest it in other areas. And not to say you couldn't do it on the smaller side, but with the bigger side, you just have more opportunity, more revenue, more opportunity. But hopefully at the end of the day, whichever path you pick, your clients are winning and you're winning, right? Because let's not miss the mark here. We want to serve our clients. Hopefully that's why you're in this business. Put out good work, watch your clients thrive, they recommend more business to you, you win, right? Hopefully at the end of the day. Small versus big, Mark, any thoughts on these parallels?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously everything we're talking about here is nuanced and gray. It's not really black and white, but I mean, I do like the the concepts that you've thrown in here. I mean, the one thing I would say is I'm looking at the small side, and as you're going through them, I feel like that's probably kind of more so where I've had a lot of my, the majority of my experience. I've had some slightly bigger stuff, but the smaller side of things. And I think when you're in Facebook groups and things like that, that's really where you hear a lot of the conversation about. And I know we'll get probably to more pricing and stuff, but when I think of small, I think of definitely sub 20, right? Sub $20,000. And I think a lot of people are now in that $5,000 to $10,000 range with a lot of things they do. So just with that in my mind, as I'm looking at this, easy projects, yes, but I would almost I would put a star next to every single one, because easy projects, yes, until you let it become difficult, like unnecessarily. It goes back to the managing expectations thing. I know we could probably just say manage expectation and shut the stream off, and then that's it. But I don't want to harp on it. But like, I think that is a really important one. Great customers. I don't know if I'd use the word great. I think I'd use the word like very like relatable customers, because they're like maybe a small business connection there and things like that. It's definitely different though than a big project, because with a big project you're going to be dealing with like corporate red tape or something, or like some sort of committee or something like that. So you could definitely get to talk to customers. But what I mean is, like, when I hear the word great, I mean like they could be like potentially a shitty client, but they might be like a good person that you could, like, you know, have lunch with or something like that. Because again, it's like, we are doing this by the book. I actually feel like in a lot of ways with the smaller projects, it's almost more important to manage expectations, because if you give them an inch, they may try to continue to take like a mile. So like, I would just put that in there. You know, same thing with less stress. Like, I've been in projects like, oh, this is going to be a layup. And then it's like, oh, I screwed myself because I left out important information. Most of the time it is, you know, your fault as the service provider. Manageable team definitely makes sense. And then great lifestyle. I mean, again, it's definitely all just a balance there, because if you're not charging enough money for the work that you're doing and you're still swamped on all this small stuff, then, you know, it can end up not being a great lifestyle, you know, even when compared to like, oh, $1 million project. You know, I talked to MRK WP, Matt Knighton, you know, a couple weeks ago, and he's like, he had $1 million thing that he was doing, this big project, all this stuff, and he just realized it wasn't for him. So it's like, This is a really good, important thing, but you got to understand, like, these are the potential pros and cons of these different sides, and obviously it'll spill into the next things we're talking about. But yeah, just some caveats there. But I do, this resonates with me definitely 100%.
Yeah, like the terminology, like Brandon says, also the idea of small is somewhat relative to the city size. We'll talk about that in a second. But if you're in a mid-size, I just put up this. I forgot to put the comment up. If you are in a mid-size U.S. city, you can actually get city services contracts. Yeah, I mean. Really just trying to show two extremes. You know, it's funny, like when I think about great customers, so the Celtics, this is a total like side tangent. So the Celtics are in the playoffs, right? In the finals. And went to the restaurant the other night to watch some of the game, and I'm sitting at the bar with a buddy, and there's this guy that it was in, who's obviously still selling websites, that I used to compete against when I started my agency 15, 20 years ago. And he's sitting at the bar with his laptop and like he's working on like sites. He's older than me. He was, you know, and you know, so he's been doing it forever, just as long as I was at the time. And I'm just like, you know, this is the kind of guy that he's never, because I remember competing against him. The point is like, I remember competing against this guy and be like, how is this guy's everywhere. Like, he's just walking into every small business, you know, on the South Coast and just selling every person a website. And I remember competing against him, and I would always come in with, you know, we're going to do all this stuff. Like, I was thinking big on the right-hand side for me. Like, I'm thinking big and I'm pitching big against the client. And he's just coming in and he's just like, yeah, it's whatever. I don't know what his prices were. But whenever I competed against him, people would say, oh, he's so much cheaper. But then I would be like, well, but I have a team of people. Like, I literally have people, employees. Like, I'm not contracting out. I'm not outsourcing any of this stuff. You know, I'm doing just the wrong pitch to the wrong clients. Those are some of the lessons I learned early on. But he's still out there. And that's the kind of guy, when I think small, and it's not an offensive thing. It's just, that's the lifestyle he chose. Like, he likes carrying around a laptop, going to a bar, watching the Celtics, doing work during the Celtics playoff at a bar, building websites, and that's cool. But I would never win with big mentality or big operations against that guy from a pricing perspective. You know, and that's what we'll get into when we start looking at customers. So what type of client? So we're talking about, like, this is the mindset we want to be in, how we're thinking about our services agency, and like what types of clients, you know, can you serve? What types of clients do you want to serve? And we were just talking about this. There's this differentiator, or this difference in micro business versus small business, right? So if you looked at the IRS or the government's definition of small business, $1 to $40 million in revenue. And a lot of the times we just say any project, any small business, small restaurant, florist shop, whatever, small insurance agency, anybody is just a small business. But in reality, there's like this micro business level, which you might even classify in the startup level. But then there's small business, and small business with a $40 million a year in revenue can also mean big projects for you. So it doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, I'm going after small business. They have no money, or all these projects will be tiny, because in reality, in the eyes of the government, you can get some sizable projects from the small business sector. Nonprofits can often be confused with no money, but it's not the no money part of it that's challenging with nonprofits. It's the communication and the like the board of directors, right? It's you're reporting to many people. That was a very quick lesson for me to learn. Like, oh my God, this is not the sector that I want to go after, because the sales process is long and arduous, and then the decision making, if you don't really know the space, can be also as difficult, because you're generally pitching to a board of directors. I remember before I started, like right around the same time I was starting my agency, I was leaving this ISP. And I was like, well, maybe I should get a full-time job. I wasn't really sure like where I was going to go with the agency. And I interviewed at a bigger agency that was, in Providence, Rhode Island. And like I walked in, this was kind of like the early stages of me like, oh my God, I want to build an agency, because they were in this like reconditioned like warehouse. It was awesome. It was like your typical like startup scene. Like you walked in, there was a foosball table, there was a kitchen, there's like all this stuff, and you're like, there's all these people working at desks, in this big open space. This is obviously years ago, and I was like, wow, this is that agency. This is the kind of company I want to build. And all they did was service nonprofit. And in the back of my head, I'm like, how do you survive? How have you built such a big company off of nonprofit? Until I learned about, branding, marketing, positioning, and rinse, repeat that, and you build a portfolio of those types of customers, and that space, it just compounds into being the market leader for nonprofits. And that can be in any of these spaces, but having that mindset of like core competency, dialing it in, is important no matter which sort of sector, you pick up on. Startup space, big orgs and enterprise. This is where I really saw, the big difference between like me and an agency like 10up. And I remember when I first met Jake Goldman, and we partnered together and did a couple projects early on, and then hadn't talked to him for like a couple of years, and we met up at WordCamp Miami, and we were in I don't even think they had Ubers back then, so it was like a taxi. We were in a taxi going back to like the hotel or whatever, and we were just talking, and he's like, oh, so how's the agency life? I'm like, that's not bad. I'm like, what kind of clients are you working with now? And he rattled off this list of just big enterprise. And I'm like, so you don't do any, because we were in the same market before he moved West Coast. I'm like, you don't do any of like the whatever small business anymore. He's like, nah. He's like, I could never really figure that market out. And and that was just like, you couldn't figure that market out? Like, how could you not figure that market out? And again, this is early days of my agency. And I'm just like, I don't understand how this guy can't figure out small business. It's because the money wasn't there. And the long-term, like big projects were just not there for the type of business that he was building. But that big org and enterprise space comes with a lot of overhead that, Mark, you and I have talked about before: contracts, legal review, infosec, information security, background checks, like all this stuff you have to get cleared for, which I used to do for just like a handful of customers I had at my agency. And it's wasn't bad. It's just a big, long process. More money, more time, and you really have to build out your portfolio to serve those types of customers. Have you run into any of that kind of customer yet, Mark, with the work that you've done? Like, hey, I want to review, like I want to send your contract to my legal team first and make edits and all that stuff. Have you had that experience yet?
Yeah, so I've made that mistake. I have, like, it was a client maybe a year at this point, year or 2 years ago. And yeah, it was like bigger company. I don't know if I would call it necessarily enterprise, but I think it was like a subsidiary of another company. And like I sent, it was a referral basically, and I sent a literally like a Google Slides type presentation that like didn't look incredible, but it did the job, but it didn't I think we've talked about this before. It's like if the higher the number is, I feel like the more granular almost in some cases that you need to like express like what you're going to kind of do for people. You can't. I don't know. Maybe some people have positive experiences with this, but I basically just like kind of threw down like a $50,000 price tag on like a website, explained what I was going to do, but didn't do it to the effect of like, and had a meeting, but didn't do it to the effect of like, I feel looking back on it now, I probably should have. And then their next question was like, okay, hey, can you send over your agreements as well? And those probably looked professional, but not, but kind of more like a fifth grader wrote them rather than a lawyer. So that was probably, that's obviously a big mistake looking back on it, but it is what it is. But the idea is like, you have to use, I've changed my situation since then just to kind of button things up and make things look a little tighter. But yeah, I mean, that's the real big thing is when you start stepping up, I feel like from a micro business to a small business to like even approaching enterprise or mid-level, they have more things to worry about on their end. They might have a legal team or they might be interfacing with different types of things like that. And they just want to kind of do their due diligence. It's literally just like they have more people, they can do more due diligence on you and the vendors that they have. So they're probably going to put you through it, especially if they're comparing you to other people that, might be, out competing for that contract. For that job.
Yeah, for sure. E-com, I remember one of my larger enterprise customers, the first time where we had an MSA and we had a statement of work, all the stuff, that we would prepare and send over. And then, so I kind of had that like knowledge a little bit from the ISP because we were working with some like bigger legal contracts at the time. But then they asked for our insurance binder, and I think I told you the story before too. And it's all of a sudden they were like, "Oh, you're only insured for this much. That's it. Like you need to be insured at this level." And I was like, "Oh man, this is like a whole other ball game of expectation in this space." And again, obviously, it is a massive opportunity, massive revenue, but to get into that game and to educate yourself so that you can speak towards that type of customer, it's just going to take time, right? Unless you've had experience at other jobs with it. E-commerce, of course, this could go in a million different directions, and you can also say like, hey, most customers could have e-commerce, but again, I remember a local guy who was building websites, same kind of deal. Like all he did was the quick hitters, right? Come in, $500, $1,000, and then he would outsource things. To other countries for SEO and marketing, and that's what he did. And he talked about it like, this is so easy, this is so great. He's a real estate agent now, but that's what he was doing, and he was just like doing like these quick hitters. And then I remember he called me up one day, and he's like, "Hey, I sold an e-commerce site to this, a manufacturing company locally or something like that." And he's like, he's like, "I'm trying to build it. And the site just keeps crashing every time I try to go live." And I'm just like, "Well, how big's the site?" He's like, "It's 5,000 SKUs or something like that, or maybe even more, like 20,000 SKUs that they had." And I was just like, "Well, that's a pretty big site. Like, what are you trying to run it on?" It was like some shared hosting thing. And I'm like, "What are you doing, man?" And he's like, "Well," he's like, I charge this place a lot of money." And it was like peanuts. It was like a few $1,000s or $7,000, something like that. He's like, "This is the biggest client I've ever had." And I'm like, "Man, if they came to us, it would have been minimally $50,000. You're not in the right hemisphere for even like servicing these types of clients." So it can become pretty challenging. Did you want to jump in on that?
I got a quick thing, because like I have at least one person in my life that is exactly like that situation, and I don't actually know how to get through to them entirely because I think this is a really important thing to understand, because this goes back to stuff that like I think you, like I think we've had some conversations on and off air, like where we like kind of digging into more like the philosophical, psychological aspect of some of this stuff. And it's like, you have to go back to the beginning of this presentation where it's like, what do you want? Like, and you have to have, it takes a lot of self-awareness to have any business, but specifically like web design, it's like, do you actually want to be doing this stuff and figuring how to do these things? And what's going to happen when that situation comes to you where you sold a website and then they say, "Hey, I need you to, like play with the DNS or something like that." Like you're just like a Wix drag and drop guy or whatever. And then even like WordPress or whatever. And then, "Oh, I need you to change something in the DNS," or "I need you to, go deeper into the e-commerce and membership stuff." Like, are you going to be able to have like with a straight face say like, I can't do that? Or are you going to like have to call somebody that's smarter than you? Like just those are real things that are going to happen. And the thing that I've had, you know, like specifically in my life is that has happened. People are selling websites. People that I know sell websites and they don't really understand all of those particulars that could end up coming, you know, more technical stuff. They just like the design aspect of it. And then they end up like potentially calling me, which I'm fine. Like I appreciate that. But then the question becomes that I've said multiple times is, hey, John Doe, have you ever considered maybe just like asking the client what they want up front? And then if it is outside of your wheelhouse, maybe like sending them our way before you get all into the shit here. And then I will give you a commission for bringing them to me. So you don't have to do anything other than send an intro. The fact, like people get like messed up there. It's like they don't want to they don't want to give the client away, but they don't understand how much stress and bullshit that they just added to themselves because they're selling something they don't fully understand. And I'm not saying like don't sell things that you don't know how to do. I mean, I think that you should kind of have an idea if you're taking money from people, but there's just a lot of like nuance there, and I feel like that happens way more than just like this one example that you and I are giving here. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and you just got to be honest with yourself, really. Like if it happens like twice, like be like, okay, well I need to change this. Like, so that would be my anecdote for that situation.
And then these last two I have asterisks. I won't spend too much time on it. Government contracts, of course, can be lucrative, but that's a whole other process and certainly a viable process, but certainly a whole other process, you know, to pitch and promote yourself as a government solution. And I threw this other one in here just randomly because I think for anyone who's in the audience who's just like getting started and thinking about, okay, like I'm going to watch this live stream and try to figure out like where my clients which types of clients and where and how I can get them. I think also like this whole other agencies thing, because that's another piece of my revenue stream in my early days of starting the agency, was just subletting out to other agencies, right? Hey, you got a client, not my client, but I'll just commit my time to help you build this thing and you just pay me. It's a much easier process. Obviously you won't be as profitable. Well, you can still be profitable for sure, but you might not be as profitable if you sold at retail to a customer is what I'm saying. But you also might not be able, the most important thing is you also might not be able to put it in your portfolio, right? So again, early days, me and my studio and 10up, 10up had the TechCrunch project and we helped them build that, but I could never put that in my portfolio because they own the contract with the customer, right? So I could never use that or use that to help sell the business or sell clients on doing business with us. I put this in here, but we're quickly way behind on time. I wanted to build out a pros and cons of like small business versus like medium business. I kind of wanted to workshop it live, but what I'm going to do is, if I think I can do this right, is copy this from our private doc that we had. And just kind of quickly do this. That's not updating live, right?
I think it's on a different slide. We're on medium on the share, but I'm looking at it on the left. You got to go to small on the screen share. I think, yeah. There we go. Oh, maybe it doesn't update while you're sharing too, while you're sliding, your slideshow.
Yeah, so I just to fast track this, what I wanted to do was, let's get a little format. We'll briefly talk about this. Boy, right there. So Mark and I were kind of workshopping this talk a little bit behind the scenes, and we met on this stuff. And we're putting in the concept of like, hey, maybe I want to just be a freelancer, just doing small business, air quotes, small business websites or smaller projects, that kind of thing. But you know, we were thinking, hey, maybe you're a freelancer and your goal is 75 to 150K a year as a freelancer. I know it can go up and down, but just like in that pretty big target area, one might find themselves as a freelancer. You don't want to work for an employer. You might want to supplement full-time work. So you're just doing this on the side. And in a pros and cons scenario, super quick, you focus on one strength, you do one thing really well. I only want to do like brick layout build, like using bricks, building out these sites. And this is like the core competency of sites that I build using bricks. Boom, hands clean, I move on. That's why customers come to me. They want this solution, potentially. I'm just throwing it out there. The other pro is you don't want risk and responsibility. So maybe these types of customers are good for you because, again, going back to what you want, you like low risk, low responsibility. There are still customers that my agency still runs. My dad runs it day to day. We still have a team, but we still have customers from when I was there running things with him. And it's the same problematic customers that never wanted to, pay for more resources, upgrade to better service, yada, yada, yada. And you get these customers that are calling you on the weekends, their e-commerce site is running slow, products are not updating, emails aren't going out. These are the types of things like, man, do I want this? Or do I want to build a team that's going to help me do this? Really helping wrap your head around that.
Yeah. Quick point on that real quick. Yeah. Quick point on that, just because you're explaining an avatar that I know very well. There's a type of avatar that is like a small business owner in a different industry, like maybe a restaurant owner, that they don't really want to grow. Like they're just like complacent. Like their business isn't falling 100%. Apart. They just make enough money every year and they're happy with it. Like they work really hard. They produce a good product a lot of times and they just want to maintain. You have to understand if you're in the marketing space more or less here with web design, you have to understand like how much marketing driven are you? Like, do you just want to put up a website and just be done with it? Like you have to match what you're providing to what they actually want. And a lot of times there's a mismatch there. Like you're selling like, oh, this is going to be awesome. Like you're talking about earlier, like, this is going to be awesome. You're selling big to somebody that doesn't really want to grow. They just like, if you want to sell growth services, the client has to be growth oriented. And a lot of times they just aren't. And that is what it is. Then you just sell them something else and it's just, okay, just pay us a flat fee and you have what you need and we have what we need and it's fine. So you got to understand that. That's kind of that part.
Yeah. And I have a slide that's going to sort of touch on that in a moment. Type portfolio, like, you can build a portfolio of like, here's what I do really well. If can I do this work? The answer is yes. Take a look at this portfolio. And you can diversify it with education. I think like there's different things you can do to also supplement that income that isn't always like pushing lines of code or design and stuff like that. I think when you and I both talked about this, I think that this is the con. The customer expectation is low. Like they're not looking to grow. They're not looking to do anything else. So that back end of the business, which is so important, which support, maintenance, future growth, you might see less of that on the back end with that type of customer. Front end, is nice and profitable. They came in, they were like, okay, $5,000, $2,500, whatever that number is, boom, done. You're finished in 30 days, so you're profitable. But future growth, future expansion might be low for that type of customer. And I think here we have these cons. Like if you're a freelancer mode, you have to be the one doing all the work, right? You've made this active decision to like, hey, I'm just gonna be the one who runs everything. I'm the guy at the bar drinking a beer, watching the Celtics, but also building out the website. Or maybe he was doing invoicing that day. Perfect time to do it. You're watching the game, you're sending out your invoices. So you're in the freelancer mode, you're the one that's responsible for everything, for doing all the work. And then a higher risk to the client. So if you ever start to push the boundaries and sell into that other space, medium business, enterprise business, then they look at you and they say, well, you're a big risk because you're just a freelancer. So there is no continuity plan. If you get hit by a bus, we lose everything. If your systems get hacked, we get hacked. So, there's a higher risk to the client. Pros and cons, again, sorry audience, I wanted to go deeper into this stuff, but we're quickly burning the clock, as they say. Let's talk about qualifying yourself and the client, qualifying you and the client. Like, do we feel like this is the work we want to do? And this is how I've you kind of look at it, the typical like where the mind goes when they say, hey, is the customer qualified? It's like, do they have the budget, right? And from the range of, well, is it $100 that they have? Is it $100,000? And like, where can I find this customer somewhere on this up into the right graph? And where do I want to be? in terms of like project size. What do I need to, live that freelance lifestyle? What do I need to go into the enterprise space? Like what size projects, do I need from these types of customers? And then as you evaluate that, like where you're landing on, like what project scale you're at, you start to understand like at the lower end, just like the customer Mark was talking about, probably less stress for that type of person. Probably easy for you to do a bunch of those types of customers with the low stress, low low project budget size. You can do a bunch, and then it gets a little bit more complex in the middle. You need more people, you need more time, you need more resources, and then it gets infinitely more stressful, more costly to do business when you're at the higher end. Although one might argue you could be a lot more profitable up here as well. But really what I found is never getting stuck in these middle areas, around the middle. It's okay to stay in the middle, but I think like what you don't want is to be pushing the boundaries too much in the middle where you're not profitable, but things are getting super stressful for you, but you're not seeing enough profitability here. And then the same goes for here where you start pushing into this space and you're like, you know what? I just want these easy people. I just want to build brochure sites. And that's totally fine.
I think you need to build, and this is something that I've struggled with, like you need to build like at least one prong of your business that's really solid, and then you can like start to play around with the other things. Like, we've had a lot of conversations. Like if you can master the easy, like the small business tier, and you could like just churn that out, then maybe you could like put that on autopilot, so to speak, and then start to kind of rank up. But you need to kind of be at like your safety net level, where it's like, okay, I can go play around and see if I can fish in this other bigger pond, but something, you can't be like fishing all over at all the same time. Like you got to try to just do one thing.
Yeah. And then as you evaluate that space, right, you evaluate, budget, sales, the actual development time to build out the project. How many can you possibly do, right? Is it 5 a year at 100,000, or is it 25 at 2,500, 25 plus projects a year at 2,500 a project or whatever? So like, depending on where you're at, it's trying to understand, like, again, what are you trying to build? And then sort of just framing it in your mind, like, what would it be like if I had to get 25 projects a year? And can I build a system for that? Can I build a system for that that's profitable and the customer gets value from it? We talk about this all the time, Mark and I, off the air, is like, hey man, sometimes like that whole build a website in a day thing isn't so bad. Like if you can be super profitable and you can get it done in a day, not that bad, depending on where you're at in your business. And then can you compress that? Can you make something even more valuable with even more profit for the customer? And you get it done in 14 days. What does that look like? Is it website in a day and steroids, and we also build an e-commerce site for you? I don't, it really depends on like what you want to do, but just conceptualize the amount of projects that you want to do per year with your agency, or find that perfect mix that Mark was talking about, like having 60% small, 30% medium, and 10% large. And that's how this is where I ended up, in my agency life over that decade. This is pretty much what it looked like. 60% was just like, hey, brochure types of customers, pretty easy, had like one person on the team. Once we sold it to the local customer, it was very easy to say, like, here's the process, run through this process. It's just these 2 or 3 themes that you're picking from, and we'll coach you through setting the stuff up and get you out the door. Set them up with like newsletter and the blog and social. Again, you got to remember this is many years ago. So very easy to rinse, repeat that process. The 30% in the middle, these were the ones that were always like that, unfortunately, kind of like the hand-to-hand combat. These were the ones that, we pushed the envelope of budget. The customer was, it was a big investment for customers. They wanted a lot. It was important to them, but it was always the one that was always the most difficult. These ones in the middle were also portfolio pieces. Like we were solving challenging problems, but we were solving challenging problems for growing companies. And they weren't mature, and maybe our processes weren't mature to like solve that middle of the road thing. And while it helped serve the customer, helped serve our portfolio, which helped us land more customers, these were always the more problematic ones in terms of like profitability and time. And then we had a handful of retainer projects for the enterprise space, like the software company I mentioned before. Those were like massive profit cash cows because they were just buying our retainer hours from us, and we were just really like steering the ship for their internal WordPress needs. Couldn't get enough of these, but certainly a great market if you can, like really push into the areas where WordPress is being used in an untraditional or non-traditional manner. Choosing the clients for you. So these are the qualifying questions. I think this is the last slide I have. Yeah. Qualifying questions. Is this the project for us? So at the end of the day, this is how like I evaluate this is this the project for us? Like customer comes to you, they knock on the door and they say, we want to do this thing with you. We heard you were the best. What can you do for us? So immediately in my mind is like, is this the project for us? Is a membership site attached to a Salesforce ERP system the right thing for us? Yes or no? Is this the client for us? How do they come to you? What are the red flags, right? What do you know right off the rip where you're going to run into issues? We brought this project to somebody else. They tried building it for 6 months. They really screwed us, and now we're standing on your doorstep with the same box of problems. Yeah. Like, oh my God, do I want to deal with this, right? Or do they come to you and say, we don't have a lot of money for this because we already failed 2 or 3 times, and you're like, see you later, find somebody else. Is there a budget for this project, right? Do you really see a budget with this customer? Like, are they really going to have the budget for this project as they come to us? Again, the same issues that I had. I built a system that was more for the big side than it was the little side. And when local customers came to us, it was very difficult to serve them as much as we wanted to. Try to fit them into this process didn't work. It was too difficult. A clear vision from the stakeholders, right? When the customer comes to you, like, do they have clarity on what they want? Or are they looking at you to say, please figure all this stuff out for me? And if it's please figure all this stuff out for me, you ask the questions above one more time, like, will you have the budget for it? Will it fit my process? And are you the right customer for us to go on this journey together? Like, if I'm figuring everything out, I need to make sure that you're letting me actually steer the ship and not, decision by committee. And is there any support in ongoing opportunities? Is this like a one and done deal? Which is okay if it is. Like, if it's one and done deal, it's okay, but you just have to figure out like how you structure your business. Do I want support from this? Like, will I be able to build this and iterate on it? And we used to do this with a couple local magazines. We would build like the surveying system from them, and it'd be the only project for a year, but I knew that the next year it was always, they'd come back and we'd have like this 60-day sprint to like update all these new features and stuff like that. So, there are some times where it's like a one and done thing, but then you kind of know like, oh, on the back end, we're going to get, more contracted work. This is much more of like, I don't know, this is not like hardcore sales qualifying questions here, but this is how I see it from like the 50,000 foot view, observing the agency. Like, I want a healthy agency lifestyle. These are those questions that help me qualify for those decisions. Do you have any other qualifying questions you lead with, Mark, that are along the same ilk or on a more like hard sales process?
I think if every person selling websites asked and honestly got answers, either answer themselves from like the discovery call or that initial like synergy call that you would have with a client, if every single web designer, developer, whatever you want to call yourself, asked and got these questions answered, then everybody would be in a much better place, because the answers to these questions, if you hear them objectively, are going to kind of tell you exactly how the project is going to go, good or bad. Obviously there's wiggle room there, but like you were talking about with the red flags, like you got to be honest with yourself with the red flags. You can't like brush those under the rug and be like, maybe they'll be different this time. It's probably if they've screwed up a couple of times or whatever, if they blame other people, that's a bad sign. There's a million red flags we could talk about. I like the support and ongoing one. That's important. We're going back to the website in a day thing, really like understanding what people are. Like, one thing that I have a hypothesis on that I might start trying, you could actually probably kind of work with anyone as long as you set your expectations around what they want. So if they like as a quick example would be like if they're the type of person that's going to pay you for a website in a day, maybe they don't want their hand to be held and for you to like handle their support and things like that. Maybe they don't want that subscription. Well, if you're fine with not getting that recurring revenue, then just be like bundle that into the thing. It's like, all right, I'll set you up with hosting, but you have to, like, a website costs money, but you don't have to pay us. You know what I mean? So it's like, just, it depends on how much you need, like the cash in certain different ways and what you're willing to do, what you know how to do. But I think that ultimately those qualifying questions, if you can get those answers, you're gonna be really good off. I don't know if I have anything off the top of my head to add to them. Those are pretty good high level ones.
So we'll open it up to anybody who wants to ask questions in the audience about like picking the right clients. I tried to compress that as much into 1 hour as possible. So we'll cut to either questions and answers, and I'll just show you behind the scenes of some of like how Mark and I, or at least I, was thinking about presenting a different topic. And we transferred. I transferred the topic into picking the right client because we really wanted to dig into building out, like picking the right agency, for yourself. I felt like you had to answer that internal question first, like what's my goal and what kind of business do I want? And then maybe start next with, okay, which clients do I want to go after? Because I do see it as a, sort of up into the right graph. Like you're going to start somewhere at the bottom, learning and figuring out which clients and building out your process and systemizing it all. And I don't care what, build an agency course or membership you're a part of. Like one of my good friends, Troy Dean, was big into this when I started my podcast years ago, called WP Elevation. And that was probably like the gold standard for if you're launching a WordPress agency, you were probably signing up to Troy's, mastermind class or whatever he called it. But now it's called, now I'm forgetting what he calls it. Jeff, if you're still in the audience and you remember what Troy calls his new thing, he got away from like the core thing of WordPress. And it's still about like helping agencies, but what I'm getting at is I don't care like which agency like program you're a part of. It's always going to evolve. Like you're going to evolve, right? You're going to get better, more efficient, and you're going to really push the business. Even if you're a freelancer, you're going to really start to find better clients, and then take away from you start to let loose your bad clients and let loose those old processes and find the customers that fit a new thing. So this is a revolving door. But this type of business that you want, let me zoom in. To this is where we had originally thought of is like, if you're that lifestyle freelancer type, you want that 75 to 150K. We talked about that. And then you go into that agency world and you might start to consider yourself an agency for many different factors. But this one here is, well, maybe you're doing $250,000 to $1 million a year in revenue. And that's when you start to call yourself like a boutique agency. It's me, a partner, a couple part-timers, maybe some contractors. And when you look at it objectively, you're saying to yourself, well, it's more revenue. Like the pros are, it's much more revenue than me being just a freelancer. Maybe I can tackle more interesting projects. Like the stuff that I'm doing now is a little bit cooler than what I was doing with a freelance work. More flexibility to do other products, right? So this is, again, you start to look at like WordPress plugins, themes, info products, stuff like that. And then the cons are largely just 10xing the cons from like the freelancer life, where like now the customer expectations are a little bit higher. Like they want more from you. So there's that layer of stress, which also translates into, again, when we moved from like small agency with a lowercase a into, well, kind of capital A agency, what it meant was, oh, we're getting bigger customers. Oh, like this handoff, like we can't just go from the founders, like me and my dad being the sales guys, selling these customers and then throwing it over to the designer and developers. We needed an intermediary. We needed a project manager. And that all of a sudden now you have this, again, years ago, you had a $60,000 line item to your costs, your annual salary that you're paying a project manager. And all of a sudden, like now the stress of running that agency goes up a lot more. And now you need many more projects to, fill the gap. But became much more like efficient on the process. Now we could sell hand it to a project manager. Project manager would onboard the customer, educate the customer on what's going to happen, what the experience is, and then load that off to the developers and designers working on the projects, right? So building that agency out is great, but what you don't want to do is land somewhere in the middle with not enough profit. The cons are fill the seat with talent. So I know, Mark, we talked about this before. There's a lot of stuff that agencies can do, front end, back end, SEO, copy, project management, all that stuff. Like, do you want to do that? And then you start getting into the early days of like legal and accounting, because once you're in this middle area, you start bumping up to those clients that are like, oh yeah, we want to do it. What's the insurance? What's the legal? What's your contracts? We're not going to, our policy is to pay you, net 90. And you're like, wait a minute, like I need to get paid tomorrow. Like this is like, you start pushing that. And then we look at capital A agency, which I would classify like 10up, web dev. This is big business, right? You're thinking big business, 50 plus employees. You need a lot of revenue to run this kind of business. The pro is it's a big business, right? So hopefully you're profitable. You're building something that's a massive asset. You can make a bigger impact on WordPress community if that's interesting to you. The cons are, customer expectations are a lot higher. Cash flow investment, a lot higher. Legal is a lot higher. Competition against like the real big agencies. These WordPress agencies are tiny compared to like global mega agencies that will also do WordPress development. You just never hear about them because they're not looking in this little corner of the web with us, right? They're not, they don't look at this, right? These big WordPress agencies like 10up and web dev, they're big for us, but they're tiny compared to the big advertising agencies or do-it-all agencies that bigger brands push up against. And then I wrote down million plus. I forget what this was. Probably project size or something like that. I don't really remember where that was. But the idea is like looking at this from like lifestyle, lowercase a agency, capital A agency, right? And like where do you want to end up on this life cycle? Tudor asks, what kind of network events or activities do you prefer to find leads? For me, I haven't been in the agency game since I ran my agency, which is about 5 or 6 years ago at this point. But for me, it was online. For me, it was online marketing and building relationships with other agencies. That was my go-to. Yeah, for local customers, for local clients, we did all the things. We did all the things small businesses say that you should do. Join the chambers, join multiple chambers, go to all the networking events, sponsor golf tournaments, go to any local event, go to help nonprofits. Oddly enough, we also ran a local print guide. There's a small like tourism sector where I'm at, and we actually ran a printed non-traditional digital media asset, and we would print and distribute those around the different tourist hotspots, and that got us a lot of leads too. People really looked at us as like a media company because of that, so they were hiring us for things like that. But when I was in the local space, it was going to any event as possible. But once we started getting bigger, it was relationships with the bigger agencies, and then asking as soon as you get a bigger client, asking them for referrals, right? Once you've shipped the project and everyone's happy, like, hey, do you have anyone else in your professional sector that might also want to do work with us? And the referrals from other agencies and other partners like that were quite massive. Now, a lot of the customers were in the sort of tech space, so it was very easy for them to like understand this whole process of like, oh, you need something built, you should go check these people out. Might be a little bit difficult if like your space is manufacturing and stuff like that. But Mark, I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, there's obviously a million ways. People tell you all sorts of different stuff. I think my biggest overall thing is that you have to try something long enough for it to work or not work. You can't like try Facebook advertising, print advertising, and like referrals all at the same time. Devote like, a portion of your energy to all three. And then when nothing works, you're like, damn. I would probably try to lean into like one that you feel the most resonates with you and do it for a period of time and see how that works. I'll tell you personally, most of the stuff that our agency has gotten has been a lot of referral from, we get like good client and then they refer us like to their network and things. The thing that I'm leaning heavily into at this current time is similar verticals. So like maybe like if we're in web, then go find like a buddy of yours or like a parent another company in your area that does like IT work and set up a relationship with them, because they are going to have people. You want to find the people, if you're selling websites, you want to find the people that are constantly being asked, do you do websites? And then their answer is like, kind of. And that for me, that's IT. So I had that happen. And then we established like actually monetarily incentivized relationships. I think that's key. We could talk about that at length another time. But I hate the idea of like, oh, I might give you 10 clients and you might give me none. And then like somebody's going to get mad. So that's like kind of a personal thing I have. But like affiliate marketing, I've always been like a fan of legitimate like type affiliate marketing, not like slimy stuff. And in that case, it's 100%. I've just had total success with that. So I would highly recommend that. The last point was said like networking events. Just be sure that you're talking to the right people. Like if you're selling local businesses, go put on like a local like presentation for those people. You have to be careful because you can't really, I've seen people do it, but you don't want to make like WordPress content necessarily for clients, for prospects, because they're not necessarily looking for that. They're looking for ways to better their business. So it's just, you got to be really careful there, depending if you're going to start doing content or hosting events or whatever. You just got to first pick who you want to be and then try to find where they're going to be at and just get in front of them. That's not a great answer, but that's what I would say.
WP Tonic asks, can you quickly talk about offshoring and how this has affected the marketing, and how should that be managed, or how should it be managed? I don't have a great answer for this, but when I ran my agency, again, like stuck in that middle phase of we're growing, because the sales process, you have to understand, like when we ran our agency, or when I was running the agency, we were very much about, the experience to the customer. We had a local office. It was well furnished. You could come meet us there. We had, this TV that we would display, the work on. We have a legitimate pitch. Like if you thought of like the Mad Men TV series, like that's how we pitch. But that, because I was in, my family started car dealerships, ran it for like 50 years in our local market. So like selling and presentation was really part of like the lifeblood of everything that we did. And it was important that we were hitting that same experience. Like if a customer walked in to buy a car from us, it was, it's on the showroom, it's clean, let's step in it, let's breathe that new car smell, let's touch the new fresh buttons, let's drive it, take it for a test drive, isn't this great? And you try to like transfer that over to buying a website or signing a consultation contract. Like, we are professionals, here's the work that we've done, let's meet with you and let's do that better than anybody else or some freelancer who's going to meet you in a coffee shop. The problem is we're in a small market and there wasn't enough people to really like present that to. But when we started to grow, we had the same problem of being able to hire fast enough, hire knowledgeable people locally. It was very important that we had local people. And we tried doing the offshore thing. And I don't know, services like Codable didn't exist. I think maybe Upwork was just starting when we were doing it. There were a few like white label WordPress agencies that were out there that were largely offshore. And we got nothing but terrible, terrible work from these services. It was awful. And it was no different than the early lessons that we learned, like, again, back in the day, people were like, I want some form of directory. People go to the website, they see a bunch of things, they can register these bunch of things, it will display on the front end. Again, you're going back 15 years. And what we would do is we would buy those plugins, directory listing plugins off of Code Canyon. And we were like, we're going to make so much money. It was $75 to buy this plugin and we're going to sell it for $7,500. And then when the customer was like, okay, we'll start to customize this. And that's when everything just fell down. And it was the worst experience for us, for the customer. And we quickly learned our lessons. Oh, you can't just take this thing off the shelf and customize it to the customer's needs because the code is terrible, their update process sucks, like none of this stuff is good. And we should have just built it from scratch. Just like when a contractor comes into your house and you're like, hey, can you just refresh my bathroom? They start taking things apart and you're like, you gotta take this whole thing down. This isn't gonna work. We need to demo this whole thing and start from scratch. It's a lot of the times no different in the development world. So I never had any good experience with that. And I know how challenging it is to hire good people that know their stuff in WordPress. From Gravity Forms, from my time at Pagely, like it's not easy to find cheap and good at the same time. Mark, I don't know if you've ever outsourced to anybody. This is why I think people should partner more. Mark, you've talked about this a million times. I think people should partner more, and I also think like if you're trying to build your agency right now, partner with other agencies, even if it's at a discounted rate. You take that knowledge of working with an agency and getting that experience, and then you can build your agency. If you're doing, not saying you steal confidential information, but it's much easier to, because all agencies are looking for good help. You might not be able to build them at your agency rate, but you could build them at more of like a freelancer rate, and you can learn what that process is like. How do they manage projects? How do you interface with a team? How do you do collaborative development? And that can springboard you into building your agency. Mark, I don't know if you have anything on outsourcing.
Yeah, I don't have extensive experience with the outsourcing thing, but I think that the part that resonates with me is, and this is, again, just my personal thing. What I've literally done over the last 6 to 8 months is I've created like great relationships with other people just in the WordPress community. Some people are plugin creators, some people are community leaders, some people are agency owners, freelancers, what have you. I feel like that is overall like a better way to go about it, because then you like know the person, like you, trust you type thing. You understand the level of quality of work that they output, and then you literally just have like kind of friends to call on, pay them obviously, and be like a business relationship there. But I'm saying like if you needed like a hand, you could go that route. And then if you actually want to scale and actually want to have like W-2 employees or whatever, then you can go that route as well. But I will tell you that it gets easier. I'll be extremely transparent. It gets easier when people know you, because then they're like, it's a two-way thing. Like employees, for instance, like they don't know who their employer is. They don't know who they're going to work for. They don't know that type of thing. So if you're more transparent, upfront, honest, and again, it goes back to managing expectations, like in everything, then I think it comes a little easier. So my point is, if you make those connections and build those relationships, then you're going to have more opportunity to like outsource things to people that you kind of know more. The offshoring thing, I've heard mixed things. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I know there's a lot of different, like websites, places you can kind of get that type of work done. I mean, I wouldn't say don't try it, but just, again, be very specific. What I've really heard actually on that specific part is like you have to be very specific on exactly what you want. Because it's kind of like an order taking type style. If it's more of the transactional things that I've heard of, I don't know if other people probably had different experiences, but yeah, that's what I would say overall. It's kind of my strategy.
100%. So that's what we have for you today. Picking the best clients to grow your agency. For me, anyway, it's about that, introspective look and retrospective look at where I've, been in the past. Understanding like where you want to go with your business, understanding that it evolves over time. I'm a huge proponent that like we're learning one thing in the start, and then as we accumulate and launch projects and get a different ilk of customer, like you start to mature your process and get better. I think spending the time on the process and the experience is, just as important, if not more important, maybe than the lines of code that you're shipping and the tools that you're using. I mean, developers in the audience were like, hell no, like this is our code matters and our tools matter. But I think at the end of the day, as long as you're servicing the customer and they're happy with what they're getting, and it's valuable for both parties, then you're doing the right thing. So that's how I look at it as a 10-year veteran. I would love to go back to the age. I say this, but I'm too old now, and I have too many kids that I have to feed. to go back to, and I love my job at Gravity Forms, so I wouldn't go back, but I do love the agency game for, you know, everything that we said before is like, you know, we can build it however we want. The challenging part is, you know, getting those customers, but process, experience, and you have this great referral system. I think the wheels start to turn for the better.
Definitely.
All right, Mark, where can folks find you on the web?
Yeah, if you just if you type in Mark Szymanski, it's a hard name to spell, SZYMANSKI on YouTube, you can find me there, or if you can just simply type in mjs.bio, that'll bring up my links to everywhere, all my socials and everything like that. But yeah, appreciate it as always, Matt. Thank you so much for having me on. It was a great talk.
Victor, great to see you in the audience. Yeah, Mark, always thanks for hanging out today. TheWPMinute.com. Let me go back one more shameless self-promotion. If you want to support the work that we do, check out TheWPMinute.com/shop. It's a thriving tea. Fun fact, Mark, which I haven't even told you, you were doing a demo on SureCart.
SureCart, yeah.
I should bleep that out as I say that because I would never use it, but beep.
Oh, jeez.
And all the while you were using that, I was building this WooCommerce store and hooking it up to Printful and setting up my shop and putting all the pages together and putting in the inventory in the same time it took you to do whatever the heck it is.
I was just looking at that, but
Yeah,
no,
you were
I've used Printful and WooCommerce. It's awesome, yeah, and that shirt comes in multiple colors too. I think you're underselling this, right?
Multiple
Yes.
colors. It comes in multiple colors. You go to the shop, watch the site not load. I'm on slow Wi-Fi right now.
It's because everybody's flooding. Everybody's flooding to get the shirt. That's why it's a little slow. Come on.
Yeah, you can go
orders
to and get the dark logo or the light logo, whichever you want. Thriving. It's about WordPress thriving. It's got some. You can't see it. Let me zoom in. It's got some callbacks to. You might notice that G for Gutenberg. You might notice a little bit of group icons in there. No WordPress logos. No WordPress logos. I'm not breaking any laws. Victor, you might know, is the Gutenberg logo copyright? I hope not. we only got a part of it. Right? We only got a little piece of it there. So check it out, thewpminute.com/shop. All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you in the next one.